Let's talk about depression. It's a word we hear all the time, right? But honestly, it's one of the most misunderstood topics out there. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through the noise, look at the actual science, and, most importantly, figure out how we can all be part of the solution.
Right off the bat, I want you to see the scale of what we're talking about here. This isn't some small, niche issue. Depression is the single leading cause of disability, not in one country, but in the entire world. That's a pretty staggering fact to start with, and it really shows you how serious this is.
And to bring that number a little closer to home, here in the US, nearly 10% of adults struggle with depression. Think about that for a second. That means there's a really good chance that someone in your life, a family member, a friend, a coworker, is dealing with this right now.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by clearing up the confusion between everyday sadness and actual depression. Then we'll dive into what clinical depression really is. After that, we'll take a peek inside the brain to see what's going on biologically. Then we'll look at the road to recovery, and we'll wrap up with how you, yes you, can be an amazing ally. First step, let's get this sorted out because it's probably the biggest misunderstanding of all. We all say things like, I'm so depressed, my favorite show ended. But there's a world of difference between feeling sad and having the medical disorder of depression.
Yeah, this lays it out perfectly. See, sadness is a normal human emotion. It's like a passing cloud. It's usually tied to something specific, and it goes away. Depression, on the other hand, is a medical disorder. It sticks around, we're talking weeks at a time, and it seriously gets in the way of your ability to live your life.
So, that leads us right into our next section. If it's not just feeling sad, then what exactly is clinical depression? Let's break down how it's actually defined by the experts. So, what does it look like? How does a doctor actually go about diagnosing this? Because it's so much more than just being in a bad mood. Well, here are the official symptoms. You've got the ones you might expect, like a low mood and losing interest in things you used to love. But look at the rest. There are physical signs, like changes in your appetite or sleep patterns, just feeling completely drained of energy. And then there are the cognitive ones. You can't concentrate. You're wrestling with feelings of worthlessness. And in the most serious cases, even thoughts of suicide. And here's the clinical line in the sand. If a person has 5 or more of these symptoms, and they've been going on for at least 2 weeks straight, that's when it becomes a diagnosis. So you can see, this isn't some vague feeling. It's a condition with a very clear, defined medical standard. All right, now we're going to pivot. We're moving from the symptoms you can see on the outside to what's happening on the inside, in the brain. And this is so crucial because when you understand that depression is a physical illness, it completely changes how you see it. It's a powerful way to fight stigma. Exactly. The feelings might be intangible, but the illness itself has real physical roots. This is why you can't just tell someone to snap out of it or cheer up. It just doesn't work that way. Scientists have actually seen physical changes in the brain. Brain scans can show differences in the size of key areas that control our mood and memory. And on a chemical level, those neurotransmitters you've heard of, like serotonin, aren't working quite right. It can even mess with our body's internal clock, throwing our sleep out of whack and flooding our system with the stress hormone cortisol. It's a complex puzzle, but every piece points to a real biological condition. Now, I know, hearing all that science can feel a little heavy, but it brings us to the most hopeful and important part of this whole thing, finding a way forward. Let's talk about the road to recovery. One of the absolute biggest hurdles is that depression is often invisible. Someone can be putting on a brave face, going to work, smiling, all while they're really struggling on the inside. And that makes it incredibly hard to get help. And that barrier leads to a truly shocking statistic. On average, it takes a person with a mental illness more than a decade to finally reach out for help. Just let that sink in for a second. 10 years. But, and this is the key message I want you to hear, there is so much hope. Despite all the challenges, there are incredibly effective treatments out there. Recovery isn't just possible, it's common. So what are we talking about? Well, the most common approaches are medications and therapy, which work together to help rebalance brain chemistry and build new coping skills. For really severe depression, treatments like ECT, which is a safe procedure that kind of reboots the brain's circuits, can be an absolute lifesaver. And there are newer, cutting-edge options too, like TMS, that use magnetic fields to gently stimulate parts of the brain. Okay, this brings us to our final and maybe most important section. It's all about action. What can you do if you think someone you love is struggling? How can you actually be a good ally? This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's not a weakness, it's not a character flaw. You wouldn't tell someone to just
willed themselves to fix a broken arm. It's the same thing. Once you truly get that, everything else about how you offer support falls into place.
So what does that look like in practice? First, you can gently encourage them to talk to a professional. And then, this is key, offer specific help. Instead of saying, let me know if you need anything, try, hey, can I sit with you and help you look for therapists? Third, keep reminding them this is a medical condition. It helps fight off that voice of self-blame. And finally, just by talking about this stuff openly, you're doing your part to smash the stigma for everyone. Now here's a super important tip on what not to do. Try to avoid saying things like, oh, I know how you feel. I was super bummed out last week. Even though you mean well, comparing their medical illness to your normal temporary sadness can actually make them feel more alone and even guilty for not being able to just get over it. And this is a powerful, potentially life-saving piece of information. A lot of us are scared to ask someone directly if they're thinking about suicide. We worry we'll somehow plant the idea in their head. But the research shows the exact opposite is true. Asking directly doesn't increase the risk. It opens the door for them to talk, it shows you care, and it can dramatically reduce their risk. You know, in the end, it all comes back to this. Every single honest, open conversation we have about mental health chips away at that wall of stigma. And as that wall comes down, it becomes so much easier for people to finally ask for the help they need. That helps everyone. So we'll leave you with this final thought. We've talked about brain chemistry, therapy, advanced medical treatments, but what if one of the most powerful treatments of all is something that every single one of us can offer? What if it's as simple as starting a conversation?